NFL Kickoff Show. I am Doug Shane at Bankster17, joined as always by Michael Gudadero at The Big Gouda. You can find us on YouTube. My name, Doug Shane. We're taking a look this week at NFL cash game lineups for Week 15. We've moved our GPP conversation to Sunday morning since that's what dominates Sunday mornings. So this will be an exclusive look at cash game build for your Week 15 NFL DFS lineups. You can find our work at banksterdfs.com. $3.99 a week gets you access to everything we do, all of our articles, all of our player pools, and of course the world's best Slack chat. We cover it all: pro sports, college sports, niche sports, everything, all for that $3.99. And Gouda, how you doing today? How are things going, man?
I'm good. I'm ready to rock and roll. Another week is here, and they're playing yet again.
I know.
Without much issue, and it's maybe shaping up to be one of those weekends again, as we were talking earlier today and in the NFL chat, and we're saying, hey, let's we're pretty confident with cash. Not much news left to be had, and this was after the Drew Brees news, and then we find out Michael Thomas isn't playing. So
it was crazy how you've basically acquired my curse. You said one thing. You said, I think we're pretty good for cash. I don't think much more news will come out, and bam, Michael Thomas out, and it changed a whole lot of things for me in my cash lineup. Not the pool so much, but the lineup, it sure did. And let's hope we don't get too much. I'm at the belief at this point that either the NFL players have avoided the elevated transmission rate across the country, or the NFL has just stopped caring. I don't know which way it is, but there's football every week, and listen, we just got to get through 3 more weeks, and we're going to make it to the playoffs, which is amazing. Just quick program note, and Gouda, this is news to you probably too, but I'm sure you assumed it. Obviously, no live stream next Friday night because it is Christmas Eve. We're not gonna do anything on Christmas Eve. Maybe we'll do something Saturday. We may just go straight to the Sunday live stream. It might be an NBA live stream, maybe sometime.
Well, next Friday's Christmas Day.
That's what I meant. Christmas Day. I meant that's what I meant. Sorry, we're not doing it on the eve of Christmas Day, is what I meant.
Yes,
my bad on that one. So Christmas Eve we won't be doing anything either. Where we're gonna, there are games. There's a game on Christmas Day. Three games next Saturday, I think next week during the week we're gonna focus a lot on the NBA coming back, and on the Friday.
Yeah.
What's there, 6 games I think Friday for the NBA. Lots of big tournaments.
Christmas Day.
So we'll come back at you this Sunday 11:30 in the morning. Next Sunday 11:30. But I think I don't think we're gonna do this podcast live stream. I don't know what you even call this. Us here talking next week. It's our penultimate kickoff show, which is crazy. Thanks to those who are in the chat and joining us live watching. Nice to have you guys joining us as always. Cash games. Let's focus on those cash games. Gouda, I'm gonna pull it up. My cash game pool. I don't know how much you've had a chance to take a look at it, because we are both working professionals, so I'm not sure. I released it this morning for members, and let's pull it up and see.
Yeah, I've reviewed it. I do my homework. I come in prepared.
Takes one. That's one of us. As the teacher of the group, you would think I'd be big on the homework, but nah. It is what it is. So let's do what we always do. We'll jump right to quarterbacks. I've got 4 in the pool, but I really think there's only 2 that we're debating between this week. But I just thought, given the matchup for Lamar Jackson, he's worth putting in the pool. And given the fact that Mitch Trubisky has been playing really good football when he gets a chance to play, they say the offense is looking more like he wants it. He's starting to activate himself well in the offense, and he's super cheap. Figure it's, out of respect for Trubisky, we'll put him in there. But really, it comes down to Brees and Hurts. Well, do you think that's an accurate statement that we're debating between Brees and Hurts this week?
Yeah. So one thing I do want to say, I do think Lamar Jackson is the best quarterback play of the week, but the price just makes it really, really hard to get somebody, to really get a lineup in there that you're going to be able to be confident in, because you're going to have to really give up something somewhere at the skill positions, and that's just a little too much when we know we can get quarterback production at lower prices.
Well, I would say given the New Orleans Saints news with Brees, I just think running back got very expensive, and I just don't think we can afford Jackson. Best matchup by far, for sure, but just too expensive. I agree with you completely. Excuse me.
Yep, and
Breeze and Hurts then, huh?
Yeah, it's Breeze and Hurts. I mean, earlier in the week it was Hill or Hurts. And honestly, as much as it is Breeze and Hurts, to me, I don't even really have Breeze in the consideration all that much. Just because, I mean, listen, unless the reports during the week that were coming out that, Breeze was still a little bit behind schedule and that it was kind of flip-flopping whether he will or not play, whether that was gamesmanship towards the Chiefs or Breeze really forced the issue and kind of forced himself back in the lineup. Anytime you get a guy coming back from multiple fractured ribs and honestly, and he had a punctured lung. I mean, let's face it. I think there's a lot of risk here. Regardless of what type of game plan they do, regardless of the type of protection Breeze has around his ribs and all these different things, all it's going to take is one hit to potentially get this guy back on the sideline. And if you're only getting a couple points from your quarterback because you're losing him from injury, I mean, it's one thing if they play bad, but at least if they're in there the whole game, you get a fighting chance. But if this guy takes a wrong hit on the second series of the game and now you have and he's out, you've got no chance at all. There's already reports today that Winston now is the backup and Hill's going back to his role of jack of all trades and getting quarterback snaps and all that. Would it really surprise you if Sean Payton comes out and tries to say, hey, I'm the smartest offensive mind in the NFL. Screw that guy Randy Reed, across the sidelines from me. And Peyton goes, half the snaps to Drew Brees and half the snaps to Taysom Hill. That wouldn't shock me in the least bit. And honestly, Hill has played decent enough that you can make an argument Hill should, get some snaps as well along with Brees, and that kind of opens up their dynamics. So I'm kind of going the safer route, and I'm going Hurts. I'm taking that rushing floor. Don't forget the Philadelphia-Arizona game is going to be a very high-paced game. We saw the way that Philly played last week. We know what Arizona does on their offense. I mean, Hurts is going to have just plenty of opportunities. I don't think he's going to see as many rushing attempts as he saw last week. You're just, asking for issues with that. But, I mean, realistically, Hurts is probably getting 7 to 10 rushing attempts. And that alone is going to give him a 40-yard rushing floor. That's a passing touchdown. And, 5,900, that just lowers what you're going to need from him on the passing end. And I think he's capable there and with what he can do. So I think he's a fine play. And I don't even think, I just think there's more risk involved with Breeze and potential downside than there is there with Hurts.
Now I've rewritten my article 3 times today since I posted it. I think I posted at 7 o'clock this morning, 7 Pacific time, so about 10 Eastern time. I posted the article, and one of my sections in the article is called Decision Points. And one of the decision points was Taysom Hill versus Jalen Hurts. And I originally wrote it with Jalen Hurts as my pick, and then Hill is so good because this is going to be a game where he's actually going to face some competition, which he hasn't really in his start. He never had the opportunity to really need to do a shootout, and this was like he had to play catch last week, but he's never been like a true shootout. And this could have been that week. And so I said, you know what, for that, with the rushing floor, give me Taysom Hill. Then the news came out where Taysom Hill wasn't starting and Drew Brees was. And I said, well, all right, I think Jalen Hurts has got the safer rushing floor, but Brees is Brees. Let's think about it. And then I finally settled in on Drew Brees. And the reason I settled in on Drew Brees, I know, by the way, this is not the end of our story, but let's make the argument for Drew Brees. First of all, the game total is ridiculous. The pace is going to be maybe as high as the Arizona game, but not going to be too far off. But for all the talk of Drew Brees' noodle arm, and I've been a lot of that voice. I've been very anti-Drew Brees. If we look at his scores based on this price, $5,900, right? We have to remember this isn't a $7,300 Drew Brees. It's a $5,900 Drew Brees. If we want him to go 4x, he doesn't even need to get to 24 points. So let's look at like 23 and change, right? 23.6 is where he really needs to be. So he hit that number once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. 4 times in 6 starts prior to his injury. 4 times in 6 starts prior to the injury, he has hit that number. And he was not in, and it was against a really good Tampa Bay defense, a Carolina defense that Carolina played them well, but he didn't have to go crazy there. A Chargers has a good offense, but wasn't a complete shootout, and then Green Bay, which was more of a shootout type of a game, he was hitting that value. He was hitting that value more often than not. So I was like, well, yeah, going up against Mahomes, this makes a lot of sense. Let's roll Drew Brees out there, and then think to turn in my head. First of all, I got Taysom Hill was going to start, sniping some touches, and I agree with you completely that 50-50, I don't know, but we know that Taysom Hill now is not a terrible quarterback. At the worst, he's a more talented Tim Tebow, a more accurate Tim Tebow, a better passer, better passing Tim Tebow.
Mm-hmm.
He's good. And so if there's any question about Brees, they're going to give Hill some looks. Short yardage, goal line. I do think some gadget plays. I do think Taysom Hill could take 20% of the snaps with an upwards of 50. I do agree with that. Brees has got the injury potential, because I saw the same reports you did. They were like, yeah, he should be okay, but this doesn't seem like the week he's going to come back. And then Michael Thomas was ruled out, and I was like, Brees put up a lot of those numbers without Michael Thomas, but when Michael Thomas out, Drew Brees in, Alvin Kamara jumped up to kind of must-play territory at his price. He's $7,400. That's way too cheap for what he's doing. He's a near 10K back with Drew Brees at quarterback because he's getting 10 targets a game. He's getting inside the 5 touches. Now, I know Hill could take some of those. So then do I want to stack Brees and Kamara? And I did. I had them there for a while, but then I just started thinking, why not Jalen Hurts? Jalen Hurts, of course, was always in that discussion. But, yeah, I get that Brees is going to have the higher upside in this case. But I also feel that Jalen Hurts has the higher floor. He's got the rushing floor. He's got a great matchup. I don't think Arizona's going to scare him. I don't think Doug Peterson's going to limit the offense for him. And he looked fine against New Orleans, who has a way better defense than Arizona last weekend. And, again, that pace is surely going to help. And as I wrote in my article, Jalen Hurts isn't Kyler Murray, but he kind of is. Like, he does the same thing Kyler Murray does. He runs around. He scrambles when he has to. He throws when he has to. He's got a decent arm. And one of the things I've noticed about Hurts, and I noticed it when he played at Oklahoma, but I also noticed it when he played at Alabama, he's just a leader on the field. And he's got a great demeanor. He doesn't get rattled. He doesn't get shaken. So this environment's not going to get him. And Philly is still kind of in it in the NFC East. I understand that Washington with a win can really put some hurt on the, no pun intended, on the Eagles. But if Washington falters this week against Seattle, and that's kind of likely, and the Giants falter this week against Cleveland, also likely, Philadelphia's right there. So this game means a lot to the Eagles. $5,900, I will take the higher floor, and I have since rewritten my article again. And I do feel that I'm in the Jalen Hurts camp right now. And it does get me off of stacking cash, which I don't love to do. I already have one other stacking cash, which we'll talk about shortly this week, which, again, I don't love to do. I didn't feel like I needed to stack twice when Hurts was just sitting there staring me at the face. Because prior to the week starting, middle of the week last week when he was playing New Orleans, I said, well, there's my cash game quarterback next week. Unless he's priced at $7,300. If he's priced anywhere at 65 or less, that's my cash game quarterback. It's Jalen Hurts. Yeah. Because he's doing now what Kyler Murray did earlier in the year. He gives us what we wanted out of Murray. Okay, but he's now Murray's priced up. Jalen Hurts is not. Awesome. Give me Jalen Hurts. I'm perfectly fine with that. So before we move on past quarterbacks, should I remove any of them? Like, I really feel like if people need the $400, Trubisky's worth having in there, but I'm almost afraid if we leave Trubisky in there, it might, someone may think, if they're not listening to us now, that, hey, he might be, equitable to Hurts, but he's not. He's reasonable. I feel like leaving him in is not horrible. Is there anyone else that should be in our pool? Like, we're not.
No, I don't think there's anybody else to consider putting in there. I mean, we don't, like we always say, we don't want to expand it too much and put too many options in there when we start, driving ourselves crazy or other people crazy. I think that, honestly, I don't think we need to go further down than Hurts this week. I think it's, I think when it comes to it, I think it's pretty easy, Brees or Hurts. Or, hey, listen, if somebody's got a different feeling on some value guys or multiple value guys at the running back or receiver position, then you could definitely pay up for Lamar. So I think limiting it to those three is the smart move there. And one other thing, too, that could potentially help Jalen Hurts, let's not forget that Philly has a massive decision this offseason because it's highly unlikely to get rid of Wentz with his contract and the dead money that it's going to leave on the cap. So they're going to let Hurts play. They're going to, give him full reign. They're going to open up the playbook and let him have at it because they need to know if this guy is the future or if they need to go back to Wentz or hell. I mean, if they don't make the playoffs, they're probably getting a top 10 pick. So then, they even potentially considered maybe drafting a quarterback if Hurts doesn't look the part and they're not sold on Wentz anymore. So Hurts is going to get the opportunity there. So, there's definitely, not like we have to worry about Hurts having a limited playbook and only throwing it maybe 20 times. I think it's there that he has plenty of opportunity, which I think that helps the situation too.
I've heard there's actually internal conversation in Philly that if Hurts plays well, because they're so locked into Wentz, that they might trade Hurts for a first-round pick, get 2 good first-round picks, either trade up for a different quarterback or something but that gives them incentive to play him too again. And that's just, fan theories. But it's not the worst idea, I guess, because they are kind of locked into Wentz. But either way, you want Hurts to play because you want to showcase him if you're looking to trade him. So that makes a lot of sense. I was prepared to make an argument for Nick Mullins, but I can't. Not because there's no player that I feel I need to spend up on enough that Nick Mullins would even enter conversation. So as much as I wanted to make that argument, I'm going to save it for another week.
Yeah, and let's not forget, Shanahan is a run-first coach, and the Cowboys' defense is so bad. I mean, it could easily be a game San Fran runs 35 times.
For sure.
And Mullins hardly passes it.
I think I just wanted to throw out the stat that Mullins is top 5 all time in most passing yards in their first 15 starts. There's some crazy stat where he's among the all time greats. I just wanted to throw that out there. But
when they played on Monday night a couple of weeks ago, as of that point, whatever game that was, he was number 3. I think he was only behind Andrew Luck and Patrick Mahomes. So
it's ridiculous. So I was ready to make the argument, but the value's too good with Hurts, and if not Breeze, there's just no point in Mullins. So let's not belabor the point. This is don't want to run long because I'm talking Nick Mullins, who no one is going to use.
Yeah.
So the running back pool, I do think needs some paring down, and I can kind of see where I want to pare it down a little bit. I do think with I'll explain my thought process on this one a little bit. I think you have to play Derrick Henry this week. I think if we learned anything last week, it's sometimes you eat the chalk. If everyone is on Henry, and Henry was over 30% in the cash games I was in, he was over 40%, and we didn't have him. And if you didn't have him, you lost. And if you did have him, and even if you had him, he sucked. So did 40% of the field. See, the week prior when we had Derrick Henry over Dalvin Cook, Henry was 10% owned, and Cook was the one who was at 30% owned. And Henry did not go off, and our lineup was far too unique to withstand a 7-point Henry performance. Last week, if Henry had 7 points and we all had him, wouldn't have mattered. The rest of our lineup was tight, would have made a difference. This week, 30% of the field, 40% of the field is going to be on Henry. I think you gotta play him. And I think 40% of the field is going to be on Alvin Kamara at this point too. So I think Kamara has kind of moved into Derrick Henry, got to play him territory. So the real question comes in, are you playing a third running back? Which third running backs are going to be? Are you team Akers? Are you team Taylor? Do you want to spend down? Do you trust Jeff Wilson? I've got this massive affinity for J.K. Dobbins, though I do think now with the fact that I do think Kenyon Drake is very usable this week if you need to spend down, and the emergence of Kamara, I don't know if Dobbins is really cash game worthy. Perhaps you're better off using him in a GPP because I really love the matchup. I love his snap share. He's at 65% snap share. Ingram got nothing recently. It's going to be the Dobbins show, and I love Dobbins. But I'm just not sure we need him in cash this week. I'm rolling Taylor, Kamara, and Henry. I'm stuffing all 3 running backs into my lineup, and I'm going to find what I need. And I don't feel like I had to make too many concessions to make it happen. And we'll talk about that as well. Where's your head at running back? And do you have an opinion on Cam Akers on top of where head is at? If that part of your conversation?
Yeah. So Akers, I do think he's an excellent play this week, but I've been kind of following the same mantra basically every week with the Jets. It's either passing game or nothing. And especially too with a team like the Rams, where they do have 3. Let's not forget they do have 3 viable backs there. Malcolm Brown has stolen enough touchdowns this year. He has been the goal line back. Henderson gets his touches, and honestly, if the Rams defense has been so good that if the Rams are up 28-0 in the second quarter, are they really going to give Akers another 20 carries again? Are they going to get that way, or are they going to?
They're not
work in. Yeah, that's my thing. I mean, the Jets have been playing so bad that it's almost to the point that these guys need to have their production in the first half, or else they're not going to get there.
I've got to give you a crazy Jet stat that I'm sure you read in the article, but the Jets have allowed one 100-yard rusher. It was week 4 Thursday game to Melvin Gordon. They have not allowed a 100-yard rusher other than Melvin Gordon in week 4 the entire year. There's only been 4 weeks where in 2 running backs, like they've had where 2 running backs were productive against them, but they didn't give up like a ton of yards. They had a couple of guys score 15, 17 fantasy points, but teams have been going running back by committee. Like, you're absolutely right. It's the passing game against the Jets. The Jets are actually one of the stingy teams opposing running backs. Cam Akers' price has gone up. Listen, Henderson and Brown are well rested because they got like no touches last week. You think they're going to run this rook into the ground against a good run defense where they can just pass all over the field? I think that his price is up so much. This is one of those where perhaps it's hubris. I just think the whole world is wrong on this one. Like, he's going to be really highly owned, and I don't see it. I liked him until I started digging in.
I don't think for a cash game it's safe enough. And in a lot of ways, it reminds me, what was it, week 3 when the Jets played the Colts, that where Jonathan Taylor was just a massive chalk because the Colts were going to run all over the Jets, and they did, but the Colts scored 2 defensive touchdowns. The Colts defense was rocking and rolling at that point, and the Rams defense is very similar to that now. The Rams defense has really turned it on the past 6 weeks, and I mean, I think the Jets are going to be lucky if they get 150 yards of total offense this week. The Rams are just going to be there. Like even look last week with against the Seahawks, nobody really put up big numbers, yet the Seahawks put up 42 points. It's just the point totals are there, but no one real person or combination of players that you would use really gets you there. So I'm not looking at Akers in cash. There's just way too much downside, compared to the upside, and also too, it's very interesting with the rookie rookie running backs in general. They're all kind of turning it on at the same time, and it all makes sense if you take into account the lack of the preseason, the lack of the training camps, and all that. This is kind of the equivalent now of like week 3 to week 4 in the season if they had a normal off season with everything that they missed. So it's kind of cool that they're all turning around at the same time, and that this draft class is living up to the hype in a lot of ways. But yeah, I wouldn't go there with Akers in cash.
Brandon wanted to know if Greg Williams being gone makes a difference. It didn't really last week. I mean, the Seahawks were able to run a little bit on the Jets, but again, it was 2 running backs, and I think it has more to do with the schemes the other teams are running. They know they don't need to take a running back and pound him into the line 25 times to beat the Jets. That's just what it is. It's a game where you can kind of rest running backs. I think Henderson and Brown could outtouch Akers combined. I think the 2 of them combined could outtouch Akers, because you want Akers for that Seattle game I think it's next week. They play Seattle. They want Cam Akers ready to go against Seattle. They don't need him against the Jets. Like, Akers is the best running back. I get it. But Henderson and Brown have proven to be competent enough that they don't need to just ram 25 more touches down Akers' throat when they need him for next week. So I think this could be one of those games where it's kind of a rest way. It's a home game too. It's not. I think there's no way the Jets are putting up a fight in this game.
No, it's just not happening. And we saw last week. I mean, Carson was gashing the Jets' run defense last week, but he only ended up with 70 yards and a touchdown and only ran it 12 times. So you kind of, I mean, you could see a very similar output from Akers. 70 yards and a touchdown is a nice game, but it's just not getting you there. With that type of output. So I definitely think he's one of the guys that we can kind of stay away from. And another guy too, which actually it's pretty funny because we last week after Montgomery ripped off that 80-yard touchdown, I immediately sent you a message. I said I can't wait.
I remember that
David Montgomery at 7,500 next week. He only went up to 7,000, but close enough. I think Montgomery's another guy that, I mean, listen, it's a good matchup. They're going to lean on him. The guy is a true bell cow. He's I've been saying the past couple of weeks, 70% of the snaps, 70% of the usage or more. The guy is extremely reliable, but honestly, at $7,000 with Kamara at 7,400 and Taylor at 7,200, what you don't need to go there.
Listen, the thing with Montgomery is he ripped off that 8-yard touchdown last week, and they only gave him 10 more carries the rest of the week. Like, I think he's capable of being a bell cow, but they don't use him like one. Now, he's gotten his points the last 3 weeks, but like using Montgomery at $7,000 basically says that you're comfortable using him, Jonathan Taylor or Alvin Kamara this week. And there's no scenario in cash this week, given the circumstances, where David Montgomery sees the lineup for me ahead of Kamara or Taylor. Like, I'll find the $200. I'll find the $400. Like, I'll punt wide receiver. I have a $3,100 wide receiver in my cash lineup right now because I want to make sure that I've got Kamara and Taylor there over this guy. And I like Montgomery. I do. I think he's put up the points, but I mean, I am a little concerned about the usage. Those 2 weeks of 11 carries is just not great. Like, the targets are there and he's putting up the points, but I don't think they know how to use them.
I'm not concerned with Montgomery with the usage from last week, simply because the Bears just dominated that game. It was one of those games, they dominated. It was weird. I mean, whether they were running or passing the ball, they were just able to do whatever they wanted on offense. I mean, Trubisky completed 73% of his passes last week. They just had their way. So I'm not concerned with Montgomery because of the carries that he had last week. That was just a weird game from what they needed to do type of thing. My fading him is just more to the point of I'm going to need to pass on either on one of Henry, Taylor, or Kamara, and there's no way I'm playing Montgomery over one of those 3 guys.
So I think that means we've got our first elimination in the cash pool. I'm hesitant to remove Akers from the cash pool, simply because if we learned, again, from the lesson from last week, if a running back's going to be really highly owned, I get why you'd use him in case he goes off, but I'm also hesitant to put him in there, again, for the same reason I was hesitant to have Trubisky in there, because I don't want people using him. I'm a little nervous. I think he needs to come out of the pool.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not using him in cash. I'm not using him in cash.
We can definitely take Montgomery out of there. Oh, yeah.
No, I was talking about Akers, pulling Akers from the pool, though. Like, again, I get the reason to be there because the ownership, but because we don't want to run from the ownership. But I'm not using him. You're not using him.
I'm
not overly opposed. Like, if one of our members were to say, "Hey, Doug, Akers or so and so, Akers or maybe I don't know, some running back, Miles." Miles Sanders is, of course, a sticking point with all of us, but I would use Akers over Sanders in cash, because I think at least you're going to play with the ownership game, and if Akers does bomb out, so will a lot of other people. So, like, I would choose Akers over other players for a lot of different reasons, but I wouldn't recommend Akers over the guys. I guess that's the point of a pool. Like, I want to work this out here. Like, I would choose Akers and Robinson this week. I think that's
Yeah, I think
it's not a move we're making.
I think it's okay having Akers in there, because there's a better argument to use Akers over Taylor or even Kamara, for instance, and there is using Montgomery over one of those guys. I think leaving Akers in there is okay, because I do think he's viable. I'm not going there, but I think if somebody wanted to use him in cash, it's not necessarily a wrong way to go. Yeah,
like, I'm not going to fight you if you put Akers in your lineup, but I'm also not going to recommend him. So I guess that's why he's in the pool, because I can understand the usage and we can leave him there. I pulled Dobbins out from a preferred place simply because I just think the way the slate's coming around, he's more of a GPP play. I like him a little bit. I still like him for cash, but I just don't think he's a preferred play anymore now that Kamara's opened up. I do like Drake. Like, we talk about him a lot. Like, he just keeps scoring 13 or more points like every week. He's getting the usage. What are your thoughts on Kenyon Drake? And I mean, I think in that price area, he's probably your best option.
Yeah, if you're more comfortable paying down in the running back area as opposed to in the receiver area, I think Drake is the guy that you got to look at. Well, Drake or Dobbins, I should say, but I definitely think Drake is considerable for there. I mean, he's he only got one target last week because they didn't really need to pass it all that much against the Giants team that I don't think they got over midfield until the third quarter.
Giants.
Yeah. But before that, I mean, Drake had seen 3 or more targets in 3 consecutive games. He's seeing more playing time than Edmonds. He's getting more of the passing downs than Edmonds. He's the clear lead back, as far as carrying the ball. So he is going to. I mean, he's consistently getting 15 to 20 carries. I mean, he is the guy there. So if this is a game that is a little back and forth and the Eagles put up some points, yeah, Drake very easily can get 15 carries and 3 to 5 targets. So I think he's extremely viable in cash and at his price point. I mean, he's been pretty consistently getting there.
13 or more points in 6 of 7 weeks, a touchdown in 4 straight weeks. And Edmonds is a little banged up, and his price hasn't. I mean, look at his price: 55, 57, 54, 53, 49, 55, 55. I mean, like, he's been in that $5,500 range, and he's within 2 points of value pretty much every week. I know he's a little touchdown dependent, but I mean, he's doing it.
But he's the goal line back too.
Yeah.
So if they're in the red zone, if they're inside the 5, he's the guy that's out there. We don't have to worry about, man, he's got to score from 20 yards out, 10 yards out, or else he's not getting the touchdown. So
I think we did earlier in the season. We had to worry about that earlier when Kyler Murray was just hitting touchdowns literally on a weekly basis. But Kyler Murray has not a rushing touchdown in 4 straight weeks. A lot of that coincided with the shoulder injury, and it's supposedly getting better. But, I mean, if Kenyon Drake has proven to be effective at the goal line, there's no reason for the Cardinals to not continue to give him the ball to protect the shoulder of their standout franchise quarterback. So I think I honestly, in cash, I've actually switched my philosophy or my thought on this. I kind of prefer Drake to Dobbins in cash. I'll use Dobbins in a GPP more, and I'm not willing to pull him out of the pool, but I think Drake is the better cash play. I think he's the safer cash play.
Yes. Yeah, I do as well. Because also, too, Dobbins has, like you said before, there's, losing touches to Gus Edwards, you obviously losing work to Lamar Jackson. And I think, too, if they were at the 1 yard line, or inside the 5, you're probably more likely to see Edwards get the handoff than Dobbins. So that takes away a little bit from it, too. And, listen, playing Jacksonville, could be a game that they're up a lot as well. And yeah, I mean, Dobbins may see a little more work than say Akers would in a blowout. But there's a lot of guys touching the ball in that Baltimore backfield for rushing attempts and different things. And who knows, if it's a blowout, maybe they put Ingram back in there since he didn't see a snap last week. It's possible that they
protect the rookie.
Too. Yeah.
Yep. I'm with you.
So I think Drake is more comfortable in a cash lineup than Dobbins would be.
Couple quick words on Henry and Taylor. Over the last 3 weeks, they are the 2 highest scoring running backs in fantasy, and Detroit and Houston are the 2 most generous defenses, which is why I think it's insane that I'm not seeing those 2 guys locked into every cash lineup across the industry, and then Kamara becomes a smash play as well. I get it, because if you want to fade one of them to spend up elsewhere, I just don't see a lot of spend up places elsewhere. One name you'll notice is absent from my cash game pool, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Gouda, is Leonard Fournette. Looks like he's going to, we don't know what about Leonard Fournette this week. We do know that Ronald Jones is on the COVID list, and if he's inactive, one would think that Fournette would get the touches, but Bruce Arians hates Leonard Fournette. I mean, that's clear. He hates Leonard Fournette. Had him as a healthy scratch last week. That's something we have to consider. That maybe Fournette isn't even going to get the touches. Maybe they give it to Keyshawn Vaughn. Maybe they give it some work to Sean McCoy, or maybe just maybe Tom Brady, who's had 35 or more attempts in about 2 games this year, just throws the crap out of the football, because that's something that Bruce Arians wants to do anyway. He don't like to run the football anyway, even at $4,500. Because I do, you hear people saying, well, maybe they go Henry, Taylor, Fournette, or Kamara, Taylor, Fournette. I'm just not there. I mean, I'm so anti-Fournette, I can't even put him in the pool. I'm looking at your face. I see you agree with me.
Absolutely no way. I mean, we're going to expect the guy to get double-digit touches after he was healthy and active last week for 35-year-old LaShawn McCoy, or however old he is now. I mean, listen, if they thought last week that they were better served having McCoy out there getting those change of pace touches than Fournette, I mean, there's no way that Fournette's going to get enough touches to pay that off. I can't see it.
We've seen this offense have less than 10 carries in a game before. Like this year, it was like the record low for carries in a game in a win or something. Like they're not interested in running the football. So
listen, I mean, Tampa's coaching staff is not as good as what Brady had in New England, but we saw the past 2 years, the Patriots running game was Brady dumping it off to James White. They really didn't have a running game the past 2 years. Maybe 2 years ago, late in the season, Sony Michel as a rookie came on. But really, they didn't have a running game, and Brady was just fine. Now, again, it's not the same coaching staff. They're clearly not as good as what was there in New England. But to the same token, there's no reason to think that Brady, can't throw it 45 times and dump offs to McCoy or Vaughn or even occasionally Fournette. Gets you there for their running game. But at the same token, that it's kind of why James White was never really a kind of a cash play for the most part the past couple of years, because those running back dump offs are never consistent. You don't know when they're coming, what you're getting from them, or anything like that. So I just think even looking at Fournette is just a dangerous spot to be in.
He is in my it's a trap section. Like it's a total trap. Big Matt wants to know I think I've got the answer for this one. He wants to know if Brees can't finish the game, does Kamara still produce with Hill? Or before even last week's game, said that terrifies me. But right now I feel better given the way Kamara's played the last, a little bit over the last couple weeks. He's getting around the same 11. What he got, by the way. Yeah, even with Brees in the lineup, the problem is when he was getting 6 targets over 3 games. Well, they rectified that with 10 targets last week in a game that they were trailing. Remember, they were kind of comfortable against Atlanta, Denver, and Atlanta. The other 3 starts from Taysom Hill. This 21-16 game is a little misleading because I believe New Orleans took a lead and Atlanta just came back to make it close. So they never felt the need where they had to throw. Last week they were down. All of a sudden, Kamara gets 10 targets again. And let's forget, he did have 17 points the week before in that Atlanta game, which wasn't terrible because he got in the end zone. He scored 3 of the 4 games Taysom Hill played quarterback. So for even me, I've said some of I'm concerned Taysom Hill's going to steal some touchdowns. Dude has 14 touchdowns this year. Like he was priced in the $9,000 range when Drew Brees was quarterback last. We're getting him at a $2,000 discount. Scared? No. In the back of my mind, sure. But not enough to pull him at 7,400. At 9,500, I maybe think twice about this. But at 7,400, Kamara's a lot for me. Kamara's fine. I'm perfectly comfortable with Kamara.
Yeah, I mean it's one thing to worry about the injury risk with using Brees, because if Brees goes out, it torpedoes your lineup. But if Brees gets hurt, Kamara is still in there. Kamara will still have a role, so the day could be salvaged. Or again, listen, if it's one of those games where Mahomes is just scoring at will every single drive, Kamara is going to be highly involved because he's their best offensive player with Michael Thomas out.
Agreed. Jeff Wilson's in there simply because Mostert is a little bit banged up, but even if Mostert plays, Wilson still gets some touches. I don't think you need to go there, but I do think he's on there more so too because I prefer to use him on FanDuel. He's actually really low priced on FanDuel, so if you had to spend down on FanDuel, where their running backs tend to be priced up, like it's weird. FanDuel's weird because their pricing's soft, yet their running backs are so expensive. Like it's hard to jam 3 of them in there. So I think a guy like Jeff Wilson being in there is a little more useful for FanDuel. I'll put the price in there later for FanDuel. I think he's more of a FanDuel only player. Let's move on to wide receiver, unless there's someone I'm missing. Good. I don't want to begrudge you.
I think we've touched everything on the running backs part.
I feel that the more we've done this exercise, the more you and I are kind of aligned with our thinking of cash. Like there's less differentiation in our thought process as the weeks go. There's less adding to the player pool as the weeks have gone on, which is great.
Yeah.
Cash.
I mean, it's actually before we go there, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure.
He's not a consideration because of where the quarterback is, but I mean, McKissick would have been in a fantastic spot if Alex Smith was starting, if the calf injury didn't keep him out. But I can't really trust anybody for a cash game with Haskins in there. I mean, they didn't have much to write home about in the backfield last year. There wasn't much that he did passing. I don't think passing wise to the running back. So sure, maybe it's possible McKissick gets double-digit targets in a game that they're passing a lot because Seattle's putting up points, but Seattle struggles all on the road. So I think McKissick maybe is someone to look at on a GPP end. So I just kind of want to mention him, but because
he's priced
again,
out, though.
Because again, yes, he is. But I mean, Antonio Gibson's going to be out, so McKissick's the guy back there. And please don't say Peyton Barber. So I just kind of want to mention that because he should be on people's radar, but just not in a cash perspective.
I hear you there. No, that makes sense. Moving on to wide receiver, a question was put in the chat, so I'm going to address this first. And Mark wants to know because he's definitely read the article. Because I'm using both Taylor and T.Y. Hilton in cash, and I know one of my big rules is don't stack in cash. And now especially if it's a running back and receiver, and now I'm stacking Hilton and Taylor in cash. The reason I am is because T.Y. Hilton is too damn cheap right now. The way he's been playing has been ridiculous, and I can't not use him. Like, he's scored 18 or more points in each of the last 3 weeks, has really emerged as the wide receiver one. Even if he has his worst week of the last 3 weeks, he's still hitting 3x value on $5,500. He only needs 16.5 points to get there. He destroys the Texans. And the Texans are one of the few teams in football that have had viable running back and receiver for cash game production in like 8 of the last 11 weeks. Like, it's in the article, and I don't want to pull up all of it, but like 2 weeks ago, both Hilton and Taylor hit value based on this week's price against Houston. Last week in Chicago, both Montgomery and Robinson hit value against Houston. And there are a number of different examples of that over the last 8 weeks, which you can see again in my article, where the running back and receiver have hit 2.5 to 4 or higher multiplier on their price. And I think in 5 of those weeks, it was 3x for both of them. Again, Taylor and Hilton, Ty were one of those pairs that did that. And at $5,500, I feel like it's the right move, because that 4 to 7K range for receiver is a wasteland this week. I hate it. There's just so few players that work, and Hilton is just, to me, points per dollar, cream of the crop. There are 2 wide receivers I like in that range a lot, Ayuk and Hilton. And I didn't have Ayuk in there for a while because I didn't think I could get up to him at 6,300. I really would have preferred him to be like 57, 56. But the guy's been balling out, and I was able to make it work anyway. I just think at some point you just got to take the best values on the board. If they happen to play for the same team, you go for it. Like, I think Jack Doyle could be a really interesting play for Indianapolis at tight end, but I'm not going to go 3 deep on my stack.
No.
Like, I'm definitely not stacking there. But there are certain situations where you have to do it. And you said, am I worried? Yeah, a little terrified, because it goes against one of my big mantras of cash games. But you also want the best value plays. And one of my other mantras of cash games is it's okay to break your guidelines every once in a while. And this is one of those scenarios where I think you have to do it. I mean, how do you feel about my decision to play Hilton and Taylor in cash? Are you making the same decision? What are your thoughts on that thought process?
I'm not going that route yet. A lot of it hinges on Miami's offense and the news that we're going to find out about Grant, Parker, and Gesicki. Because if all of them are active, it kind of takes me off of Bowden a bit, because now he gets back to number 4 in the pecking order. I mean, their backfield may be a little short. I'm not sure if is Gaskin back this week? I haven't seen news on him, or is he still on the COVID list?
Let's find out. Since he's not on my radar, I didn't really worry. It says C19, but let's read if there's any news on him, because I didn't. They said he could miss multiple testing positive. I don't think he's playing this week.
Probably won't. All right. So, I mean, there's possible that Bowden, gets more touches because they work him more kind of as a swing back or things like that. But still, it still worries me a little bit being number 4 in the pecking order. And if Salvin Ahmed is back this week, that definitely hurts Bowden's prospects too. So I'll be watching very closely on the Miami news. If Bowden is not playing, it's probably going to have, if all those guys are active for Miami, I'm definitely going to have to take Bowden out and go that route, which may, put me on Hilton. But I get it. I absolutely get it. I know what the Texans have been doing on defense, which is not much of anything. Number one receivers, as you said, have been torching them. Plus the running backs. I mean, it's a sieve. They've lost Bradley Roby as well, so that was their number one corner, who was kind of doing an okay job, but not really. So that opens things up. And too, if you look kind of when Hilton started, coming back into the fold, was around the same time Jonathan Taylor really started breaking out. And also too,
not coincidence, I don't think.
I don't think so. And also too, what I mentioned about the rookies with no off season and kind of training and learning, let's not forget Hilton only played 10 games last year, so he missed time. He was banged. This is a guy that's always banged up. So
brand new quarterback too.
And yeah, he didn't have that he didn't have that time to really learn with Rivers in the offseason. So maybe now they are finally clicking, which, listen, we know what Hilton's done in the past. Like you said, he's always abused Houston. Even when their defenses were top 5 defenses, Hilton would still go off for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns with Andrew Luck throwing him the ball. So maybe Hilton is finally waking up and turning it around, for their playoff push and everything. And if Hilton is back to that number one receiver that he's been in years past, 5,500, he's a massive steal, and it would definitely make sense having him and Taylor in the lineup together. And again, the offensive production has been very it's been, when players go off for Indianapolis, the production is very, very condensed,
concentrated,
and that's what we concentrated, and that's what we've seen the past couple of weeks with Taylor and Hilton. We saw it last week, and it's very possible it happens again this week. It's there.
It's scary because Reich. We don't always know what Reich's going to do.
Yeah.
So it's scary. But your point, yeah,
and it gives me a little extra confidence because the Colts defense hasn't been what it was in the beginning of the year. They've been better. They had that little swoon in the middle of the year. They've improved off of that. But still, when you got a guy like Deshaun Watson on the other side, Watson can put up points. And coming off that embarrassment last week, I think Watson will be motivated. So if Watson's putting up points, that makes it better for both Taylor and Hilton too.
Listen, Indianapolis has been shooting out quite a bit recently, and this blew my mind. They have put up 30 or more points in 8 of their last 11 games. Like every week we sit there on the Sunday stream and a little bit on the Friday stream, and we're like, why is Indianapolis at why is the total over 50 points? And every week they get there. Last week I said, I don't think they can get there, and they got there. He almost got there on their own. They scored like 44 points last week. It's ridiculous. And this is a great matchup. Houston's terrible. So I think it's one of those cases where I just
and
I don't think it's the wrong move to make. And I hate being wrong. I don't think I'm wrong on this one. I think this is the way to go.
I mean, yet again,
I just don't like that mid-range receiver. I did want to talk about Ayuk just a little bit too.
I was just gonna say, yet again, their total's over 50. It's 51.5. It's the second highest on the board, and everybody's expecting a massive shootout from the Kansas City game. Kansas City's total is 52. So that I think there's something to be said with that. So it's definitely viable. I mean, I'm there with you. I haven't gone there yet, but it's extremely, extremely viable.
And as I pull up the stats for Ayuk, I will apologize out there for the talking over. My computer's on a weird delay when I run streaming, so I try to stop it, but I talk a lot, and I'm trying really not to. So I do apologize for talking over. We're trying not to. It's just tough. One day I will have much better equipment. If you subscribe to banksterdfs.com for $3.99 a week, we'll be able to afford nicer computers. No, I'm just kidding. We'll be okay. Let's talk about Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk has just been an absolute monster over the last 7 weeks or 5 weeks, whatever it is. Like, he has become the man on this team. Even in games when Deebo Samuel's played, he's had 7 or more targets each of the last 5 weeks. He's hit 19.7 or more points each of the last 5 weeks. He needs 18.9 to hit his value. Dallas is awful. Ayuk, they love to throw him these short little passes and let him run around too, which I love about him because he's not just a great route runner. Judy's a little bit better, but Ayuk is a very underrated route runner, but he is so shifty in the open field and he's so athletic that when they give him these bubble screens and they just let him do his thing, A, it adds to his targets, and B, it allows for some yards after the catch, and that's helped him. Look, he's been over 91 yards in 4 of the last 5 weeks. The guy has been insane, and it's not just been touchdown dependent. He got there last week without a touchdown. He got there week 7 without a touchdown. He got there pretty much in 2 of the other 3 weeks, almost there without the touchdowns. And I heard something today too. It was on a different live stream, but the way that the offense schemes itself, the Richie James game, when Richie James went off, they found out last minute that it was Ayuk. I think it was Al Zeidenfeld who brought this up today. And he said, listen, that was the scheme for Brandon Ayuk. So there's another week in there that they were kind of scheming for him to have a big game. Like this guy has become the focal point of the offense. Again, he's a guy. As I watched the game last week, I said he will be in my cash game lineup next week. Now, I really didn't think he'd be at 6,300. I honestly thought he'd be in the 57, 58. We talked about him on Sunday morning about Ayuk on Yahoo because he was priced so low at just $14, which for Yahoo is only $4 above minimum. A player of Ayuk's ability should have been $18, $19 last week. So, I threw him into my cash lineup there. And I was really impressed with the performance. And I said, boy, I hope he's not too high on DraftKings. I would have liked to have seen 58, 5,900. 63 was one that I had to go back and forth on this week because it was really hard to fit him in. But what I did was I moved off of Bowden, who I do think that he's a great play if what Gouda says about the other pass catchers comes to fruition where 1, 2, or all 3 don't play. If Gaskin is still out. I think Bowden's a great play, and I even wrote him up as one of my cash core players, but I actually had to pull him out of my lineup, thereby making him not a core play that has to get rewritten. And I went all the way down to $3,100, and I picked the best $3,100 receiver I could find. It was kind of between Greg Ward, which may end up being the play because I do like having that stack sometimes. If they're both really cheap plays, it worked each of the last couple of weeks. Definitely did last week with Disley. At tight end with Russell Wilson. But right now I've got Steven Sims in there. Dwayne Haskins likes Steven Sims. Sims was a really strong cash game play towards the end of last year. It just $3,100. He just needs 9 points. The guy's a 5-target a game kind of a player. Seattle, we know how bad their pass defense is. I know they've been better the last 5 weeks, and we love their defense this week against Washington, against Haskins. But if they can get the ball to Sims 5 times, that'll pay off. And that may be Greg Ward, and that's some of the things we have to understand is every once in a while you come off of your pool, you take the best guy at the position you want, because I feel so strongly about Ayuk and Hilton and Henry and Taylor and Kamara. That's a really strong quintet of players. And if that means I had to punt my defense, which I did, unfortunately, and a punt one receiver position with the guy who should see 5 targets, well, that's just going to be what it has to be. Because if I think a guy like Hilton is a full kind of a guy, that extra 5.5 points he'll score will help pull up those other guys who might not get to 3x. We just take the best guys we can at the price we get at those last couple of punt positions and hope we get there, and hope those guys that we really want to spend up on get there. I mean, we know Henry is capable of a 4x game. Taylor, Kamara, they all are. Hilton has gotten there the last 3 weeks. Ayuk has gotten there. So that's kind of where we work with that build, and where you might see some other names floating down in here as perhaps opens up. The Baltimore receiver situation, if Dez Bryant is still out, and if Marquise Brown with the COVID list is out, I mean, they're really starting to build a number of players in that COVID list. If they're not cleared for the game, guys like Willie Snead and Devin Duvernay become really good values at $4,300 and $3,100 respectively. Those are guys we can take a look at and throw into a cash lineup who should get a lot of run on their offense in a good matchup. These are the kinds of things you have to be willing to do to get those guys you want. And again, this is a Brandon Ayuk take. Really, it's not a Steven Sims take. It's a Brandon Ayuk take. I feel so strongly about him. I'm willing to punt from Bowden to go get a guy like Steven Sims and put Steven Sims to get a guy like Ayuk in my lineup and get a guy like T.Y. Hilton in my lineup. Mouthful. Anyone on that list that doesn't belong there in your mind, or anyone I should have there that's not on there, Gouda?
Well, you brought up Dez Bryant, and I was looking at him earlier today. I mean, he's at the $3,000 minimum. He did get activated off the COVID list. And,
good.
Yeah, and if Proche, Boykin, and Brown are all out on Sunday, I think there's maybe some consideration there for Dez. He seemed to be before that the game against the Cowboys where he got pulled last minute because of the positive COVID test. It seemed like he was kind of starting to get towards the top of that target list. He had played pretty well in the prior games that he was out there. And I think there's a chance, and for 3,000, we don't need that much. I mean, I think he's a consideration there. If you don't want to go the Sims route because you don't really trust Dwayne Haskins. I mean, Sims had viability last year. I do remember using him last year and him kind of coming on at the end of the season. But I think Dez is a guy at minimum price that you can consider because again, we don't need that much from him and what he can do to get other guys in your lineup. It helps. So I think it's maybe a consideration from Sims. But other than that, I mean, my receiver pool is pretty even on where you are. I mean, there's no one else really that sticks out to me, and I think all those guys are viable in there and reasonable. I mean, like I said on Lynn Bowden, I think we just got to watch the news. He's probably the one guy that is closest to coming off. I would definitely change him. I think I would change Bowden from a preferred play just to a guy in the pool as a consideration.
I agree with that.
Just because it's trending that all those other guys are going to be playing, and that just really pushes Bowden down the list, especially if Salvon Ahmed is active. I think that's going to hurt. That hurts Bowden the most if he's active. But aside from all the other receivers.
And I do think the sub 4K guys are really the sub 3.5K guys. It's just hard to list all the potential ones that could play in a pool. I think we need to see as we get closer to lock, particularly the inactives. Listen, if those three guys are out for Baltimore, I'm probably coming off of Sims for Dez. I missed the news that Dez came off the COVID list. I just think it's a better matchup. He's the better player. He's got a far better quarterback. I think, you want Dez to have, another great game to add to his career. This is a great way to get him started against a really bad Jaguars team.
Yeah.
I did want to bring up Russell Gage real quickly, simply because I've been down on Russell Gage, especially when Julio Jones doesn't play. When Julio Jones doesn't play, Russell Gage tends to play poorly. Well, he didn't last week. Forget the touchdown pass that he threw. That's fluky. And sorry I didn't predict that. But those 7 targets are not fluky. The 5 for 82, that's 13 points. That's just about value on this price point. I think Russell Gage is really in play. Tampa Bay has been very weak against wide receivers. Calvin Ridley's going to get the best coverage that Tampa can put together, and we know Atlanta's going to have to throw in this game. Tampa Bay is going to stuff Todd Gurley or whoever they put at running back. I could see Atlanta throwing 45 times in this game. Tampa should put up some points as well, even though the Atlanta defense has improved. I do think I don't think it's a shootout because I don't think Atlanta will be overly successful, but I could see a path to 8 to 10 targets for Gage. I think at $4,700, he's a guy who's emerged a little bit. I mean, if you look, he's got 7 or more targets in 3 of his last 4 games. He's been decent. He's not a big touchdown guy, but with Zacchaeus out and Julio out, he is a player that Matt Ryan feels some level of comfortability with. And if Calvin Ridley's getting shut down, it looks like Gage is that second option, not so much Hayden Hurst. So I do think he is a very viable play. For a while, he was in the cash game pool before I decided to just say YOLO and spend up for Ayuk and go all the way down to a super punt wide receiver. I do think if you're not comfortable with that, he's the kind of guy in that lower mid-range who is probably not going to kill your lineup. He's not winning you a GPP, but he's also not killing your lineup.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, Matt Ryan has thrown it 35 or more times 4 of the past 5 weeks. And with what that Tampa Bay run defense is, and Todd Gurley has really struggled the past couple of weeks. He's really kind of fallen off the cliff. I don't think anybody in that Atlanta backfield does anything against Tampa. So it's highly likely Ryan throws it, over 40 times this week simply because they just need to. They're not going to be able to run the ball. So that just, I think, helps the Gage argument. And, I do have him in my lineup right now, and I think he's extremely viable in there, and he's been more consistent. He's seeing more consistent targets as well.
I do think one of the reasons too, that a Russell Gage could get overlooked this week is people think just because Matt Ryan is playing poorly that his receivers must be playing poorly, but Gage has played really well, again, 3 of the last 4 weeks, and Ryan had 10, 15, and 7 points in those 3 weeks, yet Gage did really well in those 3 weeks, and Calvin Ridley's done really well as well. So just because a quarterback's playing really poorly, he concentrates his targets a lot as well to a couple of guys, and it's generally in this game going to be Gage and Ridley. I think they're both viable plays. I don't want to spend up for Ridley in this spot. I just don't think we should be spending up at this position anyway, especially $8,200. Get the same matchup and the same ownership benefits by going down to Gage. You won't get this high of a ceiling, but you don't need as high of a floor either to get there. Because again, we're not spending up at receiver anyway, which is why Robinson's not a preferred play. I think the matchup is great, but I don't know how you can fit Robinson with the 3 high price running backs we're putting in our lineup.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, last week Matt Ryan only threw for 224 yards. I mean, Ridley and Gage combined had 210 yards.
Wow.
So now it's a little thrown off because Ridley did catch that 39-yard pass from Gage. That was that weird play that they had. But still, I mean, 75% of Ryan's passing yards went to Ridley and Gage combined. So even if Ryan struggles again and throws for 230, you could see a very similar output again.
Yeah, and again, if Gage goes 7 for 80, he's at 15 points, and you're feeling just fine. And that's within the realm of possibility. If he gets in the end zone, he's crushing value, or he only needs 4 for 40 with a touchdown. He's at value. So I think it's really reasonable. It's a really good point to make. Moving on to tight end. I don't love tight end this week. For me, it's one. It's Cole Kmet or nothing for me at tight end. Cole Kmet, 7 targets each of the last 2 games. Jimmy Graham is banged up a little bit right now. I don't know why we wouldn't use Cole Kmet at tight end this week. There's no reason to spend up at tight end. Kelsey, by all means, that was really loud. If you are deciding to Derrick Henry, I had a talk with my buddy Steve just today because he hates Derrick Henry. He's like, "Why are you going Derrick Henry?" And I explained all the reasons. He goes, "What would your cash lineup look like without Derrick Henry?" And he's a big Oregon fan, so I sent him a lineup that only had Auburn players because they beat Oregon in the national championship, Oregon State and Cal. Because I'm an asshole, but the real had Travis Kelce because my philosophy there is I know that's what I do. It had really bad players like Deshaun Jackson's in that lineup. But the real lineup had Travis Kelce because I said the philosophy for me is if you're going to get off of Henry, you need to replace him with another stud, like a top guy at his position. And that guy is Travis Kelce. It's not a receiver because there's no, to me, stud receiver to be fading Derrick Henry for, but no tight end close to what Kelce can do. Few receivers are doing what Kelce's doing. We've been talking him up a lot. Gouda has been all over Kelce, and he's been right with Kelce. He has given you wide receiver 1 production. He has more receiving yards than any receiver in the NFL. He has been the best wide receiver in the NFL this year, and he's a flippant tight end. Yeah. So, going to fade Henry. If you're like, I'm not doing the Derrick Henry thing, this is the pivot you need to make. Or if you're fading Taylor or fading Kamara and you're like, I'm going to spend up at a different position, this is the pivot, and it's the only pivot you make because the difference between Travis Kelce and any other tight end in any other roster could be enough to separate you and make up for whatever Derrick Henry may or may not do. And that might be the play, especially in a potential shootout. I'm not there because I like to spend down at tight end and I want my running back to have that volume. I just think the bubble's going to burst on Kelce, but I just think the point production is a little more guaranteed with the running backs. But if you're coming off one of them, that's the position to make. If you're not coming off one of them for Kelce, then you should be using a spend down at tight end, and that would be Cole Kmet again. The seven targets each of the last 2 weeks. Jimmy Graham banged up. That's the play. I could make the argument for Jack Doyle because Burton and Mo Alley Cox were banged up, but I'm not seeing an injury designation next to Trey Burton at this point, which would pull Doyle out. Oh, yeah, he participated fully. But I also don't think Burton is necessarily a cash play at this point. He's just seen nothing recently. It's Cole Kmet. It's Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet's the guy. Like, I don't even – Irv Smith I like, but he's a little expensive at $3,600. But with Rudolph out, I do think there's an argument, I suppose, you can make for Irv Smith. But to me, it's Kelce or Kmet. Should I even have Irv Smith in this pool? What should I be doing here?
So
you like her.
I do. So I just want to touch on Kelsey. Like I was emphasizing it last week that it was ridiculous that Kelsey hadn't been priced up more because he was basically a bargain at where he was being priced and with the production, because on a point per dollar basis he was giving you what Devontae Adams was giving you every week. But now he's getting into that Devontae Adams price territory, and again, even at 8,000 with what Kelsey has done the past couple of weeks, he's been there. But now when he's at 8,000 and you absolutely need him to keep doing that, that becomes a little more worrisome. Because, again, at 8,000 as a receiver, for Kelsey to get there, he's getting there on volume. Let's call it what it is. He's getting there on volume. And, of course I'm going to say this and it's going to happen. But, Kelsey is not getting you there because he's breaking a 65-yard touchdown. It's taking volume. He's had 8 or more catches, I think, in like 6 straight weeks. That's insane. It's literally what Devontae Adams is doing.
Yep.
But now you need him to continue doing that. It's not, he's at 7,000. It's great that he's doing it. He's 8,000. He needs to do that just to start sniffing his volume. Because at 8,000, you need at least 24 points. I mean, he needs 8 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown. You need a touchdown now. Without a touchdown, he's not getting there. He can have a great game, go 8 for 110, and he's not getting you there. So now you're starting to get into dangerous territory with Kelsey just at that price. And at tight end, when I was shaking my head yes at Irv Smith, Smith's my favorite tight end play of the week, but I am going to go Cole Kmet because that extra $600 does do a lot for my lineup. Mm-hmm. But Kyle Rudolph is out again. Irv Smith has pretty clearly established himself as the number 3 receiving option there. I do think he's a little ahead of Dalvin Cook in a way. And he's talented. He's kind of
so talented.
Figure it out. The Bears have been bad against the tight end, and if you watched that Bears game last week, Jordan Akins struggled, but the end numbers should have been so much better because he lost the ball in the sun and it hit off his shoulder pads where he was wide open for a touchdown. It's one of the worst things one of the worst plays you'll ever see in your life.
It was awful, like right there. He didn't even see it. It was right next to him.
It was the equivalent of a center fielder looking up and losing the ball in the sun. It's exactly what happened. Yep. So the numbers should have been a lot better there, and the Bears have been bad against tight end. So listen, if you have the money, I definitely think Irv Smith is the better play over Cole Kmet, but when it comes to tight ends, sometimes that money is well more worthwhile in other areas. So that's why I'm going Cole Kmet. But if you can get it in, I would definitely recommend Irv Smith over Cole Kmet this week.
It's the same argument with the lineup construction for the wide receivers. Why I'm spending down to Steven Sims or Dez or Greg Ward over Bowden. I prefer Bowden. But I also prefer Ayuk, and you've got to decide where you're going to spend that money, and it sounds the same thing. We need that $600 this week. I just kind of building a lineup with Kelsey instead of one of the running backs, and it's just because you can get a tight end for $3K or under $3K. Like you just have to do awful things with your lineup. Like you got to put Bowden and another punt. Like you can't even get Chad Hansen in there. Like you can't. You'd have to come down somewhere else. You couldn't get, if I wanted to put even Drake at flex, like you have to do so many things that just
you almost need to come off of Henry and one of Kamara and Taylor and go maybe to like 8, Akers or Dobbins and Drake. You kind of need to go cheap on 2 of the running backs if you used 3 running backs in the lineup.
And Henry gives you that really separates himself from the rest of the tight end field, but I don't know if it's enough to come off of 2 of the 3 prime cash game, 2 of the 3 prime, bless you, cash game running backs in this position, because running backs is what drives our cash games. It always has at Bankster. It probably always will. Sometimes maybe to a fault. I don't know, but I think the running back strategy has really worked well for us. And I'm not trading running back to get a tight end. Not 2. I'm not trading 1. I'm not trading 2 to get the best, even if it's the best tight end ever. Maybe best tight end season. That's for sure.
Best tight end season. Yep.
Oh, for sure. It's approaching some of the best wide receiver seasons ever. So taking a look at the defense for me, this is another one of those situations where I'm probably going to come off my pool in order to make Ayuk happen. And I'm probably going to use either the Jets or the Jaguars simply because they generally don't kill you. I don't know. The Rams, that offense just doesn't excite me enough that I feel they're going to run it up too much. The Jets are bad, but Jared Goff stands there. So if he takes 2 sacks and they don't give up 31 points, I get 2 points out of the Jets. I'm happy. But given my druthers, Seattle Seahawks defense is where I really like to go this week. And I know a lot of us at Bankster want to go Seahawks. We love the matchup against Dwayne Haskins. Seahawks have been really good. They've just been really good the last 5 weeks, basically since Carlos Dunlap signed with the team, averaging a ton of sacks, over 3 sacks a game. They're averaging nearly a turnover a game. They're not giving up a lot of points. They're not giving up a lot of passing yards. They've scored 5 or more fantasy points in every one of those games. This is a great matchup for them. But I'll never take a defense over a real player. And this comes back to Ayuk. I would prefer to have Ayuk in my lineup. I tried to be able to salvage the Falcons. It would make me Cole Kmet, and maybe if I could get a $2,800 tight end appealed to me, I could do this. Right now, it doesn't. Falcons haven't been terrible recently. 4 or more points in 4 straight games. If again, Tom Brady's not running around, so he could get sacked. Their ability to get in the backfield has been much better over the last 5 weeks, basically since Raheem Morris took over. Over the last 4 weeks. So 30% of the season, they have accumulated 44% of their sacks and 44% of their turnovers for the season over the last 4 weeks. Look at me doing math. # math teacher. They have not given up more than 24 points in any game. They've looked kind of good on defense. And those rush yards against are sort of misleading because they were facing a rushing quarterback, Taysom Hill, who ran the ball a ton, which I guess would, on the other side, say, well, I guess it helped the passing numbers, but they haven't given up more than 243 passing yards in 4 straight games. Like, this defense isn't terrible now that Raheem Morris is in charge. They're not great, but for $2,300, they don't have to be. They have to score you not negative. Like, that's what we're looking for, is not negative. And I do think Tampa Bay is going to throw a lot, but I don't know how successful they're going to be with no running game. Atlanta can rush the quarterback. They can sit back and try to, in the back end, can sit back and try to pick off passes and anticipate where those passes are going to be. Brady's arm isn't great. We know he's not throwing the ball downfield very well. And if they get a couple of picks and a couple of sacks, you're looking at 6 points. That's great for $2,300. I'll take that. So, if I can find a way to get to that, I would. I can't currently. I'd like to. But those to me are the 2 best defenses for the money because we're not spending all the way up for the Rams. I think the Rams will probably put up the most points because the Jets are awful. But we don't spend $4,500 on a defense. Never have, never will. Just not going to happen this year. It's not worked out yet this year. I'll spend down and be very happy about it. Even $3,100 is a lot for me. It was a big shock when I said, kind of mentioned that lineup to people. Like, $3,100, that's crazy. That's not you at all. But, it's a great play. But Falcons would be fine too. Good. Am I missing a defense that you like this week?
I think Washington can be considered.
They were in my pool originally. I pulled them right before we went on the air.
Yeah, I mean, if you're building lineups, if you have a couple extra dollars to spend, I would prefer Washington over Atlanta. I have no issue with Atlanta. I do have them in my line. I have Atlanta in my lineup currently because I needed that extra $300. But yeah, I would have no problem going to Washington. I mean, just looking at
it's a crazy 4-week stretch. Holy cow!
Oh, they've been playing great. They've been playing really well, and let's not forget, there's only been 1, 2, 3. Yeah, Wilson's thrown interceptions in all but 5 games this year. He's lost fumbles in 3 games, and the Seahawks O-line is just not it's not that good. They give up sacks. Wilson they've been sacked multiple times in almost every game this year. Washington gets to the quarterback and. This is another one of those. They're traveling east. Seattle's traveling east. It's a 1:00 game. And if you look historically, the majority of the time, Seattle really struggles, at least early on in these games. So if it's one of those first halves where Seattle puts up, 10 points and they're really struggling, Wilson, it's probably because Wilson has gotten sacked a couple of times and probably thrown an interception. So I think at 2,600, Washington is extremely viable here. Yeah. Again, if you have the money for it, if you don't have enough to go up to Seattle, but you have a couple extra, you can come off of Atlanta. I definitely think look at Washington there.
Listen, the football team did not get to first place in the NFC East because of their dynamic offense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's this defense. It's this defense on this. They got 4 straight games. They won 3 road games too. Like it's crazy what they've been able to do.
Yeah. They've
4 points, 4 sacks in 3 or 4 games. Like this is a team. Like good defense, not a good team. Good defense.
Good defense. They've got a lot of talent on that defense, and getting drafting Chase Young has really brought it to another level. He's legitimate. He's going to be a stud. He already is. He killed Joe Burrow, unfortunately, but Chase Young is legitimate, and he's really made that defense step up to another level, and it's been fun to watch. And I think they could put some points up against Seattle this week, and they're very viable at that price.
I've got Russell Wilson written up as a trap play this week. Not that I don't know if anyone's really on him too much, but if you're spending up that much, he's not the guy to do it. He's been struggling a little bit. Didn't even hit value against the Jets, despite the 4 touchdowns. I mean, this is. I think Seattle will be very happy to come out of this game 17-13, call it a day, get back home. I think Seattle wins, but I think it's gonna be ugly. And I think Washington's a live dog, by the way. If you're betting this game, take Washington money line, Washington plus the points, Washington in the under. It's a lot of different ways I take this game, and Seattle's not the side I pick. Even though I do think they win, I think there's a lot of value in Washington's a live dog. Hook wants to know before we get out of here. How about Cardinals for cash? Listen, they got those sacks against the Jets. I think they're going to be sacking Jalen Hurts the way that they were sacking Colt McCoy. I do get that they're a high sack team. They do turn the ball over, and they put up points. I'm just, for me, especially because I'm using Hurts in cash, not that I don't mind running my defense against my quarterback, but, all other things considered, I'd rather use Washington. I'd rather use Atlanta for their price, and I'd rather, if I could find the $200, I'd rather spend up for Seattle. And I think 49ers are actually in play a little bit as well this week. Dallas is just, they're not great. San Francisco, they turn the ball over a ton. They've been putting up a decent amount of points. They don't give up a lot of yards at all. Their pass defense is really strong. I don't know. If you use the Cardinals, I don't think you're making a mistake, but I wouldn't personally recommend them. Hook. Sorry, what was it? Hook. Good. Do you have a different opinion on the Cardinals?
No, if you're getting the Cardinals in there at 2,900, my guess is you can probably find the 200 to get to Seattle, or you can go to Washington for 2,600 and find somewhere to upgrade the 300. I don't think, because I think it's a different Philly offense now. Yes, Philly was getting abused by defenses when Wentz was back there, but Wentz was, as a Jets fan, let's use the phrase, Wentz was seeing ghosts back there every week. He was getting sacked. He was seeing, he was snapping the ball and he was seeing rushers right on top of him, even though they weren't there. He was just struggling. I know it's only 1 week, but it's different with Hurts a little bit. I think GPP.
But it's not just 1 week, though. It's not just 1 week. It's every week this year. Carson Wentz got sacked 3 or more times every week. Jalen Hurts.
Well, I'm saying with
zero.
Yes, but I'm saying with Hurts in there, it's only 1 week. That.
I know, but I'm just saying, I think 1 week's enough, is what I'm saying. I think 1 week is enough to say that pattern, that cycle is just F. I think I don't think you can look at what's happened to Philly. I'm agreeing with you 110% on that. Yeah, no, I agree on it. I don't. Again, I'm not gonna smack anyone for playing the Cardinals or tell you again that you made a huge mistake. And I agree. Hook is saying the line isn't any better. It's definitely not. But I do think that Hurts has the ability to escape a rush a lot better than Wentz. And I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. I think Wentz is going full Rick and Keel. I just think he cannot. Everything that can go wrong, he's in his own head. He's doing things he shouldn't be doing. Whereas you've got Hurts who's making smarter decisions. I just don't think the defense is going to come as hard against him. And I apologize, Hook being a Midwest fan. I don't know if he's a Cardinals fan. I know he likes the Royals. I don't know if he's a Cardinals fan too. If I ruined him with Hank Hill, but I know he knows that story. So I just feel Wentz is in that. He was adding to his own problems. Yeah, the line's not better, but Hurts is better, and Hurts is smarter. His head is clear, and he's coming off a game that his confidence has got to be sky high. Again, I don't think it's a horrible play. I wouldn't do it, though. That's kind of where I'm at. So he hates the Cardinals. Good. Well, I didn't say to defend him with, pulling up memories of Rick and Keel because I'd hate to do that because we love Hook, who you can find, by the way, at banksterdfs.com /chat, $3.99 a week. Get you access to everything that we do, articles, player pools, and, of course, the best Slack chat in the business where you can further that discussion with Hook or us or any of our wonderful team. NBA comes up in, 4 days from now. We get the start of the NBA season, huge Christmas slate, before next week. You're not an NBA guy,
Yeah. No, I was just shaking my head at Hook. He's always got to bring the comment up when he can.
Is there a Jets comment in there? I have to look.
No.
That's a World Series. I love it. In the middle of my promo, guys. Come on. No, that's my fault. I'm fully distractible. Banksterdfs.com. You get all of this. Like, how could you not want this for $4 a week? And we give you good fantasy advice. Check us out. You can find Mike over on Twitter at The Good of Me, on Twitter at Bankster17. We will be back here live Sunday morning, 11:30, getting you ready for the slate. That's where we will talk GPP. We'll shore up our cash game lineups. We'll answer any questions that have come up over the week. Thank you for everyone who's joined us. Gouda, have yourself a wonderful evening. We'll talk over the weekend, and we will catch